Hello, friends. Welcome. I'm really excited to be with you today to talk about some really important topics around women's health. So thank you for joining me, and let me know you're here and that you can hear me and where you're from. You know, I love hearing about where you're from and seeing our whole global community, and again, talking about a topic that's relevant for all of us. So I see some of you signing in. Hello, welcome. Namaste. And this topic is actually very important for all of us, for all of you men out there as well. Some of these issues and some of the topics and things I'm going to talk about are relevant for all of us. We all go through certain transitions in life. Maybe the other people in your life that are experiencing some of the things I'm going to talk about. And again, this is biologically, we're going to talk today about some of the unique aspects of, women's health. That's part of that biology and the biological differences that are unique, to women's health, namely having to do with some of these hormonal effects that can create certain cycles and effects on our bodies. So thanks for joining. We'll have a lively discussion, and I'm going to give you some tips on if some of these areas are out of balance, things you can do about it. So welcome. Hello, everyone from Palm Beach, from the UK, from Amsterdam, Chile, the Netherlands, Kazakhstan, Brazil. Welcome to all. All right. So, what I'm going to talk about today, as I mentioned, are some, unique topics around women's health, the effects that some of these hormonal cycles have on this, biology and physiology. And Ayurveda gives us a lot of unique perspectives and actually descriptions of what's happening in our physiology that I, as a physician, we talk about hormones and hormone cycles and how that affects, but Ayurveda is so much deeper than that. It goes into emotions and how important lifestyle is and all of the practices we do on a daily basis and how that is so important as a reflection, how our cycles and actually everything about our physiology are a reflection of all of the lifestyle experiences and choices that we're making on a daily basis. So hello, hi everyone. Great, good to see all of you. So Ayurveda gives us a guide to stay vibrant and healthy and vital and have energy and feel good and have a good emotional state throughout all of the stages of our life. And I'm going to talk about, as you know, I love giving information first because it gives a context and it really helps to explain why, from an Ayurvedic perspective, you might do some things to stay in balance. So I always like to give you information, and then I'll share my healthy tips for you. So we want to feel good at all stages of our life. And again, this is relevant for all of us. Ayurveda gives us this amazing perspective on these life stages because we are part of nature. Ayurveda is based on the laws of nature. And just like spring goes into summer, goes into fall, we all have stages of our life. We go through the spring, which is kapha time. That's childhood is actually kapha time. So if you don't know much about the doshas, I'm going to use some terms, kapha, vata, pitta, that have to do with mind-body energies or mind-body types. But they're also, those words are describing are qualities of nature. And so we can see them everywhere in nature, in the seasons, in plants, in animals, in ourselves. And the prominent qualities can describe, our mind-body tendencies. So you can go to Chopra.com and learn more about the doshas. But childhood is that kind of growing, we're building the tissues of our body. It's kind of, in an ideal situation, that carefree, kind of laid back time of life. It's earth and water, the elements associated with kapha. And you'll see how this relates to our cycles in a minute, are earth and water. And we should definitely, yes, honor the cycles of nature, including our own. So we have this childhood time of our lives. And then we go through a transition, just like spring goes into summer, we transition into the pitta time of life. So during that transition, we call that puberty. So there's a lot of body changes going on. It's just like the plants going from spring to summer. There's all kinds of biological changes that occur, these transition times. And during these transitions, are times where our doshas can get out of balance. We can get out of balance. We see body changes. We see brain changes, which sometimes again result in emotional shifts during, that transition from childhood into adulthood, puberty. And many countries and cultures have traditions and rituals around these transition times to honor this time that we're going into. This is again in women's, as it relates to the female, like women's health, that we start having these cycles, this monthly connection to the moon and monthly rhythms of nature. And again, it's really about perspective. I wish we honored these transitions more. And I think if we try to stay in balance, we can see it as a good thing. We're entering womanhood. We're entering a different stage of our life. I know a lot of times we think, it's really, I remember thinking, I don't want this, to start. But so many cultures, again, that's why they have, these rituals and celebrations around these times of life, parties even, right? So for many of you in your cultures and traditions, celebrate that transition. Then we go into the summertime of our life, Pitta time. So this is like the summer. Our heat is highest, no matter where we live, and no matter, what our primary mind-body type is. We're all going into the summer of our life. So this is where we start having like regular cycles. And with our menstrual cycles, which cycle, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. We go through transitions every month. We actually have mini cycles within cycles within cycles. So we go from Kapha to Vata to Pitta, Kapha, Vata, Pitta. Over the course of a month. And if you've looked at my IGTV, I have some recorded videos on our IGTV channel. I talk about routines in the daily routine, the cycles of Kapha, Pitta, and Vata within the day. But it transitions within a month. And that's why sometimes during these transition times, we'll have symptoms. That's a reflection of an imbalance in our doshas, in our mind-body physiology. But that's the Pitta time of life, and that has a different expression during our lives, and again, for all of us. Then we go from the summer to the fall. So we go from the Pitta time of life into the Vata time of life. And these are natural, normal transitions that we should honor. So we're going from this kind of middle adulthood into what I like to call the wisdom years. Again, in our modern culture, we fight it, right? We don't want to. That menopause and all this transition we call menopause is that transition of our mind, our body into now the Vata stage of life. And it doesn't have to be, when we stay in balance and we have a good lifestyle routine, it actually, and healthy diet and working on our sleep. And that's why in Ayurveda, our daily routine is really important so that these imbalances don't accumulate over time. Then we can have a really turbulent transition like during menopause, but it doesn't have to be that way. And we can honor this transition. We're going now into the wisdom years. We are reflecting. This is where women can step into their life experience and everything life has taught us, and this wisdom that we've gained and self-care, like starting to move our attention inward to ourselves. And it can be a really beautiful time. And again, in many cultures, maybe from where some of you are from, that's honored. And I've heard in certain Asian cultures, people exaggerate their age because they want to be considered older rather than younger, because it implies you have more wisdom. And, some of these symptoms of menopause that really I treat a lot, here in our culture for many reasons, probably diet, crazy busy lifestyle, toxicity that interferes with our hormones, etc. But I've heard, there are studies that in Japan and some other cultures where their diet is different and they honor these times because emotions play so much of a role in how that's going to show up for us. How is menopause going to show up for us? A lot of it has to do with how we're thinking about it. So when we're honoring this transition, the minority, like less than 50% of women will have like significant menopause symptoms, like so many do here. And they're honoring that transition time into menopause. So, I love how Ayurveda describes this and really connects us back to nature, that these are our natural cycles that we go through. It's sort of like, nature goes through the seasons and cycles, and that's why there's so many rituals and so many cultures around the moon cycles, and that's very significantly tied to women's menstrual cycles. So that seems to be a very unique kind of aspect to, in women's health. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the cycles now, because, that is just such a big part of that adult stage of life and a place where many people can have symptoms. So Our menstrual cycle, our menstrual flow, obviously it's controlled by hormones. So we have the medical kind of perspective on it. In Ayurveda, it's controlled by doshas and the cycling of the doshas. And when we have our flow and our cycle, it's actually connected to the very first tissue layer. In Ayurveda, there's 7 main tissues. And the very first one is called rasa. It's sort of like plasma, or the fluid portion of our body. And it's as the very first tissue layer, dosha imbalances affect our flow very dramatically and directly. So you can look at your flow and what's happening with your cycles as a reflection of your dosha imbalances. So it's really a window into your health, your overall health. And I saw a question a little earlier about coating on the tongue, which again is, I talk about that in some other videos as well. But just like we tell people, look at your tongue, it's a reflection of what's going on in the rest of your digestive tract. If there's coating, that means there's toxicity, there's ama, toxicity. If you look at your cycles and your flow and what's happening symptom-wise, that's a very good window into your dosha balance. So in general, again, if you understand the doshas, and please go to chopra.com or go to one of my previous IGTV videos where I talk about mind-body types and the doshas. There are 3 main types of doshas, and a lot of people have aspects of 2 primarily. But just to kind of generally describe the 3, Vata is air and space. So those are the very thin, light people, a little irregular. They're a little sensitive to everything. So their cycles will reflect their Vata nature. So in general, if you're a Vata, you probably have fairly light periods, somewhat irregular. They're not always on the, at the same time. You might skip here and there, and it's very dependent on your stress levels, how you're eating, because your cycles will be sensitive, more so than other people, to your other lifestyle practices, stress, eating, etc. And you'll always probably have a tendency to have those light, irregular periods. Not always, but this is, in general, if you're a Vata and that's really your strong primary type, you probably relate to that. Pittas are the fire types. They're really intense, driven, goal-oriented, and it's heat. Heat is one of their primary qualities. So people who are of Pitta nature, yes, constipation is definitely a sign of Vata, going back to Vata. And my daughter's a Vata, so everything I said, I see she definitely has all of those things. And you might notice a little more constipation as a tendency. Pitta is fiery. So they have sometimes a lot more, they feel heat during their periods. They have a heavier flow typically. Again, my sister was a classic Pitta, so I see this, in people around me, and she always had much heavier, flow. So that can be a sign of your nature. Like you just know, I'm going to have a little heavier, or maybe a lot heavier period than this other person I know, and that's okay as long as it stays in balance. We're going to talk about out of balance, but if it stays in balance, you just know you're going to have a little bit heavier period, maybe a little bit more. Yes. Sharp pain, and we're going to talk about when you might get these, and that's just going to be part of it. The more out of balance those doshas are, the more you're going to have some of these symptoms. And then kapha types are the earth and water types, so they're more regular, steady, stable, so their periods can last a little bit longer because it's slow, so like kind of medium flow but longer lasting, maybe a little thicker, that earth and water can give you a little mucus or a little thicker kind of flow. And you might get like kind of dull and achy, kind of tired, more tired than other people, if that's your nature. So again, those are generalizations, but please keep in mind, depending on your dosha imbalances and what you're doing in your life, any of the doshas can get out of balance, right? And so let's talk about what that would look like. The cycles within cycles, so that time from the end of your cycle to ovulation, we're kind of growing an egg in a follicle in the ovary. So it's this building up phase. So building up, growing is kapha. So from the end of your cycle until you ovulate, that's kapha time. So for all of us, we maybe toward the end of the cycle feel a little tired, maybe a little sleepier, a little more sluggish. and maybe a little, bloaty or fluid retention. Then from ovulation, so this is the transformation time. This is Pitta. Until our cycle starts, that's Pitta time. So that's a time when sometimes, and it leads up to that premenstrual, before we start, the cycle. That's when people can sometimes get a little irritable, cranky, start to feel a little hot, maybe have rashes on the skin. So that's all a sign of built up fire, Pitta energy. During the cycle, so as soon as the flow starts, that's controlled by one of the Vata subdoshas that creates flow and movement. Vata is air and space, so that creates movement. And so then when we start the flow through kind of the last couple of days, that's Vata time. So that might be a time when we're feeling a lot of cramping, low back pain, maybe sleep issues during that cycle. Those are all signs that this is the Vata time of the month. So again, in Ayurveda, I always try to help people do the little things they can do to keep, stay in balance, because ideally you would be changing your activity during every time of the month. And you do want to try to do that. So during Kapha time, from the end of your period or your cycle to the time of ovulation, maybe doing a little more movement, a little more activity. So, to keep that Kapha in balance. Just like in the morning, we do a little more movement. That's Kapha time of the day. So maybe that's when you do a little more vigorous activity, because that would be good for you during that time. From mid-cycle, when sometimes people do feel this sharp pain, that's Pitta, when you ovulate. And in fact, as a physician, oftentimes I'd go into the ER mid-cycle because people had this very sharp pain during that ovulation time. It's a very sharp pain, and they would think, what's going on? So that's a sign of that's Pitta time. And so that would be a time to get a little less intense, just maybe slowing down in your exercise regimen. Maybe, not working as intensely during that time of your cycle. And then once it starts, this is Vata time, we need rest, right? Air and space is very, sensitive to things. So we want to really pay attention to our sleep, go to bed early, eat warm, grounding foods, rest. During our periods in Ayurveda, they say, don't do your asanas, don't even do your yoga practice. Like, it's rest, rest, rest. And how many of us do that, right? And sometimes we don't have an opportunity to, but, imagine those are some of the reasons we get really out of balance. And so, and sometimes that happens. I know during the Pitta time of my cycles, I can't just say I can't come to work. And especially during the times when I was in the regular medical environment, there were sleepless nights and long hours. And I can tell you, I think it's reflected as an accumulation of excess Pitta in my physiology. So again, sometimes it's helpful just to know that that's why things are happening. And then you do the things you can to stay balanced. So let's talk about that. How do we stay balanced knowing that, we're going through these cycles and we aren't always able to, adjust our schedule? First of all, I would say all of the things that you can adjust, do it. Again, maybe your mind is telling you, no, I have to do my, 5-mile run every single day. Otherwise, what would happen? You have to reflect and ask yourself, maybe you're worried that you'll fall off your exercise regimen, or maybe it is just your mind telling you you're lazy if you don't. But sometimes if hey, what's best for my body right now is rest while I'm, in my cycle. And especially if you're having a lot of cramps, constipation, sleep issues, your Vata is high during that time. Rest, meditate. Again, you can look back at some of the other videos and Chopra.com, how to balance the doshas. You would eat warm, moist, grounding foods during that period time. And so you can I give you permission to rest during those times. Then we know, okay, I know I'm feeling a little tired at the end, but it's good for me to get moving now. And maybe I won't feel so bloated. I won't retain so much fluid if I'm exercising during that Kapha time. And then during the Pitta time, again, rest, balance, not overdoing things. And also, if you have the sharp mid-cycle pains, you have heavy bleeding, those are all signs of Pitta imbalance. You want to reduce your spicy and acidic foods, the soury and spicy foods, the fire foods. That's just increasing heat to your system. You want to eat cooling things, drink mint tea or, cucumber in your water, avocado and cilantro and some of those cooling foods. Again, check out some of my videos where I talk about eating for your dosha. So let's talk about balance. So if you are a Vata type, or if you notice that during your period you have a lot of cramping, a lot of pain in the lower abdomen and the low back, cramping, it's a little bit like spotty before and after. Those are all signs of excess Vata. So during that time, you can do an oil massage on yourself. We also have information online about oil is very grounding and calming, especially before bed. Make sure you're going to bed by 10 o'clock. You can do castor oil soaked, in like a cotton cloth or a pack, put castor oil on your lower abdomen. It's very, very good for cramping. And again, this is no matter what your dosha is. During that flow time, you can, use castor oil packs on your lower abdomen. So that's very good. You can also take a little bit of aloe vera juice or gel. It's a little bit bitter, so I usually tell people to mix it in with some sort of a, juice of some kind. And you can do that 2 or 3 times a day. You can drink ginger tea. Ginger tea is very good for balancing Vata. It's anti-inflammatory and it's warming. And so, that could be something that could help with cramps even. So those might be things you would do during your cycle to help. You can also, there are some herbs you can take. Oh, also you want to hydrate. Make sure you hydrate really well because dryness is one of those things that can happen with excess Vata. Then you're going into the kapha time. So that's, again, movement we talked about. If you're feeling bloaty, you want to eat this is when you increase the light, drier foods, like lots of greens to lighten the body during that time. Some of them are diuretic. So if you're feeling fluid accumulation, fluid retention, having dark leafy greens and beans can act as natural diuretics. So you're letting go of some excess fluid. And so, that maybe you start at the end of your cycle through the mid-cycle. You can also do, if you're feeling kind of heavy, you can do castor oil packs as well. It's more of a dull achiness in the lower abdomen. So castor oil packs will help with that as well. And then some herbs that can help with regulating the cycle are shatavari. That's Shatavari, is very good. You can take 500 milligrams twice a day. And again, I would encourage you to look at what was traditionally done in your area. Sometimes things that you can find locally are, they're going to be fresher. They're going to be, easier to find. So yes, somebody said beans always work for my bloating. Yes, because that's probably a kapha imbalance for you. So the astringent light beans can help. But yeah, so I would say ask around. I had a patient once who told me, we were talking about traditional healing systems, and she told me she grew up in the South, and she remembered going to her grandma's house, and she would have her cycle, and she would have like heavy bleeding or symptoms, and her grandma took her out in the backyard and said, "See this plant? I believe it was sarsaparilla. It's not one I'm familiar with, but she, her grandma knew, like, this is what you take." And the same would be for most cultures. If you ask, people know what plants were indigenous. And so she would steep a tea and she would make a tea out of it. And she said, yeah, it really helped. So, again, sometimes you can just ask, what did people do, for these symptoms generationally? There's a lot of wisdom there. So that's the first. And then from ovulation, again, that mid-cycle, if you get pains or if you have heavy bleeding. So there's this pitta accumulation, so that when you have your cycle, it's heavy. That's excess pitta. So shatavari is very, very good. It's a cooling herb to help for heavy bleeding. So again, that's Shatavari. The other thing that actually has been studied is taking dried ginger, not fresh ginger tea or fresh ginger, like in the beginning for Vata, but ginger powder. You can take 1/8 of a teaspoon, put it in some warm water, and then drink that 2 or 3 times a day, and that can really, you start that a few days before your period and then into it, and that can really help to reduce heavy bleeding. It has some of those anti-inflammatories and molecules in it that can help reduce heavy bleeding. Somebody commented basil is great for cramps. Yes, there are many great herbs, indigenous, that, again, can help with all of these things. Plants have so many phytochemicals in them that interact with our physiology. And so, looking to the plant world is very helpful. So dried ginger a few days before the period, and then if you have heavy periods into it, then that can be helpful to lighten it a little bit. Again, if pitta is your nature, then I want to be mindful here of the time. If that's your nature, you may just realize that they are going to be, again, a little bit heavier than other people, but doesn't mean it has to be really out of balance and debilitating for you. So shatavari is good for heavy bleeding, and then again, the ginger. So those are things you can do. And then again, the packs for if you have heavy bleeding, you might want to try coconut oil packs. So you can melt coconut and, again, with a cotton cloth and use packs because that's cooling. It's more of a cooling oil. So, that's good to put on your lower abdomen if you have cramps during your, flow. Or even start a little bit before because that's that pitta time. Some question, I'm just looking here. Shatavari you can take morning, evening. So you can take 500 milligrams in the morning, 500 milligrams in the evening. And sometimes you can just do it again, working up to your period. You can, it's a restorative herb, so you can take it all month, especially if you are a pitta, but otherwise like a few days before and into your period, twice a day. Endometriosis is a reflection of pitta, typically pitta imbalance. So, those are the things you would do to balance pitta, more cooling things. Again, I always tell people also look at your lifestyle. Are you overdoing something? Because sometimes we're doing the packs and we're taking herbs and, it's not really getting better because we're still like pushing through, working a lot, maybe drinking too much coffee. Those are all things that aggravate pitta. So if things aren't getting better, you really have to look at the rest of your lifestyle. Are you going to bed at 10 or 11, trying to, get up on time? And always, always think about emotions. In Ayurveda, not only are those doshas do they get out of balance and in the body from the doshas, but also from our emotions, right? And the reproductive organs correlate to the second chakra. That's nurturing, obviously connection. Sometimes if there's sexual trauma, that needs to be worked on with people, who can help you to release that trauma. When there's energy that's stuck there, it can create all kinds of disturbance. And so we're doing all the right things and things aren't getting better. So, you want to work on whether it's journaling or energy work, crystals, aromatherapy, things that kind of can help heal that second chakra. And usually if there's significant trauma, then working with someone who can help you with that. You can also do yoga asanas. So yoga, not maybe during your period, but the rest of the month, doing some sun salutations every day. And you can look that up online and see it's a flow, but also hip openers. So hips, when we open up the hips, so just laying down and opening up your hips, or doing standing poses where your legs are apart, like triangle and reverse triangle, and you're kind of turning at the hips. That's helping to open up and balance that second chakra. Cat-cow is very helpful, where you are really bringing your pelvis in and out, because interestingly, the nerves that control the lower bladder and pelvic organs, primarily the parasympathetic nerves, the ones that the automatic nerves, they're coming from the bottom of the sacrum through the spine, and they're coming out and around and innervating that. So when you move your pelvis back and forth, that can do with cat-cow or any kind of, maybe you find different ways to really move that sacrum and move that pelvis, is going to help balance that second chakra. And again, the more we can do this on a daily basis regularly, the less we're going to feel the imbalances. Certainly when we have imbalances, there are things we can do, but the best thing is to prevent them. So those are a few things you can do. Keep your eyes out for articles on Chopra.com, because I'm going to be starting a women's health kind of series just to talk about common women's health issues. And because there are so many things we can talk about, right? But those are a few things you can start with. And I always tell people, if things aren't going, in the direction that you think that you're not getting better, then always find a practitioner. You can find, Ayurvedic practitioners, you can research, you can look for naturopaths or other traditional healers in your area, because these things are so common, right? And life happens. And so we do get out of balance. And especially with these transitions in our lives, not just the big transitions, puberty, menopause, which I'll talk about in a different video, because menopause deserves its own time. But again, another transition time that we should honor and reflect on. All of the things we do during that summertime adult life, they start to show up when we go through this transition. And so we'll spend another video talking about that. But again, these transitions through the month between Kapha, Pitta, Vata, those are times when things can get out of balance. And so all cultures around the world have, traditional, whether it's plants or foods, to help keep people stay in balance. But if you think about your cycle in that way, Kapha time is the end of flow to mid-cycle to, that ovulation to the start of the cycle is Pitta time, and then the flow is Vata time, and try to do things that balance those doshas. And then the rest of your lifestyle is focusing on regular, getting good sleep, all the time working on regulating emotions, especially if you're having issues, again, with the second chakra. Spending some more time on your self-care, like self-nurture, self-love. It doesn't always, have to be about, someone else. Releasing trauma. It can have to do with generational trauma, So that's a whole thing that's worthy of exploring, especially if you're trying some of these things and not noticing much difference. And above all else, honor yourself, honor these transitions, honor yourself as part of nature, and that these are expressions of our connection to nature. We are nature. And, again, Ayurveda gives us so much wisdom into why things, why we experience the things we experience. And to me, that helps a lot, because then I know what to do about it, right? When I have symptoms, I'm like, okay, Ayurveda would say this is because of Pitta imbalance. So what am I doing in my life that's creating this excess heat, that's creating this Pitta imbalance? And then it's very empowering. I find it very empowering that you can look, and it's the same thing isn't going to work for everyone, but it gives you an opportunity to explore, try different things and see what works for you. You're your best expert on your body and in your life. And so, that's what I find great about Ayurveda. And yes, this will be saved on IGTV. And so you can go back and watch it. You can, send other people to it. And I'm loving all your comments. I know I wish I could answer all of the questions, but as I mentioned, keep your eyes out on Chopra.com. I will be, writing about kind of different female, women's health issues along in the next several months. And, again, different little tips and healthy habits you can have to help with some of these imbalances that can happen to all of us. And so I look forward to our next conversation, and we'll cover menopause again in a different time. So again, honoring all of you for being here with me, and for your nature, and for, being who you are. So hopefully you can try some of those things. And yes, I'm just looking at your comments. Thank you. Yes. Namaste to all of you. And I look forward to connecting with you again. So thank you. Until next time, namaste.